Well, it's been a busy week in Canadian politics, and we're going to talk some of that here today with Brian Lillley, one of our political affairs contributors. Brian, good to have you with us again today. Why don't we start with the new trial that's been ordered for the Via Rail terror plot convicts? I mean, we kind of thought this was all done, but yeah, apparently not.
Yeah, we're talking about Rayad Jasser and Chayav Essagar. These were two guys who were picked up in April of 2013. They were convicted in 2015 in the Via Rail terror plot. If you remember this trial, these were guys that wanted to blow up a rail bridge that goes across the Niagara Gorge. It's a passenger rail. It's a rail bridge, but they wanted to target a train called the Maple Leaf. It's a daily direct train from Toronto to New York City and back. They'd be carrying hundreds of passengers across. They wanted to blow up the rail bridge at the where the whirlpool is. For anyone that knows Niagara Falls, just downriver from the falls, they got this big whirlpool and then a bunch of rapids, and you're up hundreds of feet. And they wanted to blow up that bridge and send the train plummeting down to the rapids below. Absolute terror, killing hundreds, if not thousands. It would have been quite the spectacular feat. Thankfully, they didn't manage to pull it off. They were arrested, they were convicted, but the Ontario Court of Appeals heard an appeal from Rayad Jasser saying, look, I asked for the jury to be selected a certain way, and the judge didn't allow it. And it all comes down to how jurors are challenged. So if you show up for jury duty, Paul, and they suspect that you've got a bias one way or another, you can't be impartial. You can be challenged. And under the old rules, it would always be two jurors would challenge you, and they would ask questions, and they would determine whether you could be on the jury or not. And if they said, yeah, no, he seems fine, then you would then become one of the people that would hear challenges, and one of the other two would go away. It's called rotating triers. It gets very technical, but suffice to say, the court said the judge erred in not allowing Jasser to get what he wanted. Speaking to a defense lawyer, they said in the United States, there's all kinds of technicalities that you can have a charge thrown out on. We have very few in Canada, but jury selection is one of them. And this basically comes down to messing around by politicians, in this case by the Harper government, but there were recently changes in jury selection brought in by the Trudeau government, and we could end up seeing more of this sort of thing. That's the unfortunate part. I think these two guys are still going to be convicted at the end, but a lot of political meddling leading to this.
Yeah, I think it frustrates the general public to no end as well when we see these kinds of things where somebody's, obviously been convicted of a very serious crime and then, kind of getting off on a technicality. Now, hopefully here, again, there's no getting off. And again, the retrial with a properly selected jury will come to the same conclusion, right? So, all right. Now, also Maxime Bernier in the news this last week. Of course, the billboards that were talking about, stop mass immigration and so forth. Those have been taken down by Pattison after lots of complaints from the public and so forth. But it's also sparked some, I think, legitimate concerns over free speech. I mean, do we give in to the protests every time, right?
Well, this is like the move to have pro-life ads taken off of city buses
Yep.
or bus shelters, and that's happened across the country. And wasn't it just last week that we were being told, Paul, that we had to be really concerned about the fact that environmental groups were told, well, if you start talking about climate change during the campaign and how to deal with climate change, then you need to register as a third party for the election. And they said, oh, wait a minute, you're infringing on our free speech if you do that. And then the next week, Bernier's billboards are taken down. Look, I disagree with Maxime Bernier. He thinks that we need the billboards, which, by the way, were put up by a third-party group, but said to vote for the People's Party. It said, say no to mass immigration. And Bernier says we should only be taking in 150,000 people a year. Under the Harper Conservatives, it was between 250 and 280,000 a year for permanent residents. The Liberals want to push that up to 350. They haven't yet, but let me ask you, shouldn't we be able to have a debate other than how many more people can we bring in? Should we be able to say, well, is 150 enough? Is 350 too many? Is 280 hitting the right mark? And, you talk to employers across the country, and they're still saying that they're having trouble filling jobs. You look at the fact that Canadians aren't having as many babies. If we want to keep the social programs we have, do need to replace the population, and we're not doing that on our own. So that does require a certain level of immigration. Let's have a debate about what the right level is. But I don't like this silencing, even though I disagree with Bernier on what his policy is.
I'm with you. We need to be able to have intelligent debates on controversial topics without getting scared every time somebody mentions something that's controversial. My goodness. And again, maybe we do need more immigrants. Maybe we just need to be more picky about who we actually allow into this country. And that's again a whole another debate. Now I've offended somebody, but that's okay. Isn't it okay to be offended? I'm sure there's things I say that offend you, Brian, and vice versa. It's okay.
Absolutely. If we're grown-ups, we should be.
Yeah.
You recall the movie just a couple of weeks ago we were talking about. Sorry, the name of it escapes me. Unplanned. The movie, the pro-life movie, that was being shut down. I didn't agree with that. If you believe in free speech, you have to believe in free speech, not just call it hate speech because you disagree with it. There's nothing hateful about saying 150 versus 350. Perhaps people can be carried away on either side, but having a debate is having a debate. It's part of our system.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's lots been debated about the carbon tax, and our Environment Minister McKenna saying, that carbon tax maybe will go up higher after the election. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know how she did this. If you remember back a couple of months ago now, the parliamentary budget officer came out with a report that said uh, the carbon tax is going to have to go up beyond $50 a ton. Perhaps it's going to have to more than double. It could go up even higher than that in order to make the achievements and hit the goals that the government set. And Catherine McKenna came out and said, oh, no, 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 we will not be increasing the carbon tax after the next election. Then she's doing an interview with the Globe and Mail. And I want to point this out because this was a planned interview. She's talking to them on the phone. She knew she was going to be talking to them about the carbon tax ahead of time. And she's asked about it. And she said, well, yes, we could be raising it. We have to negotiate with the provinces, but we may need to raise it after 2022. And, after this statement comes out, then the paper goes back to her PR person who says, well, the minister's talking about after 2022, and we're the only one with a plan for that, and blah, blah, blah. So the PR person didn't say, oh, the minister misspoke. No, twice in the article that started this, her and her department backed it. Then she's, confronted by the rest of the media at a news conference, and she's just saying, no, this won't happen, but maybe it will. Are you going to increase it? No, but we'll have to talk about it after the fact. So they have accidentally, as Pierre Poilievre, the conservative finance critic, said, they've accidentally admitted the truth. And the truth is, whether you listen to the Environment Department or economists, to match what the Liberals claim they want to do, the carbon tax has to go up.
Yeah, you just makes sense when you look at the numbers, I think. But it just blows my mind when I see this kind of double speak so often with politicians. And you wonder, and again, it's not just the Liberals. There's plenty to spread around every party in that way. But my goodness, I understand why a lot of people don't vote, and I do encourage people to get out there and vote, but I understand why they don't. Now, Ontario and Alberta have started some free trade talks. We're talking about, U.S., Mexico, Canada, but this is Alberta, Ontario. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I heard about this a little while ago, and then last week spotted some Alberta officials in town, people that I recognized. Oh, wait a minute, what's going on? Oh, yes, those talks are happening. Spoke to people, confirmed it was happening. It seems ridiculous. The Prime Minister's off at the G7 in France, and while he's there, he's having bilateral meetings with the UK's Boris Johnson, with the US's Donald Trump, with who else did he talk to? Japan's Shinzo Abe. And he's talking about ensuring Canada's trade. That's exactly what we want any prime minister doing. You got to look out for Canada's trading interests. We're a trading nation. Why don't we have free trade within Canada? I thought that's what Confederation was about in 1867, but it's not there. So these are, because the talks led by the federal government have been going nowhere, mostly because Quebec blocks everything and a bit of some of the Atlantic provinces. They don't want people to be able to move across the country and still be able to work, or businesses to be able to bid on things. So a bunch of years ago, I think it was started in 2010, there was the New West Partnership. Started out as BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. They added Manitoba, I think, 2 years ago. Now they're looking at adding Ontario to the new West Partnership. This is still not perfect free trade, but it is chipping away at those barriers that, Paul, as a journalist, you and I can move across the country and work everywhere. But
Yep.
what if you're a carpenter? What if you're
Yeah.
a paramedic? What if you're a
Exactly.
dental hygienist? Is one example. Sometimes there are different qualifications in each province. Sometimes they just put up barriers because they don't want people coming in. So one part of this is about getting rid of those types of things or making it so that companies can bid. It shouldn't be easier to do trade or to work in the United States than it is to move across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, wouldn't it be nice just to be able to have that complete freedom anywhere in Canada? I mean, the training you get, I mean, oh, my goodness, it's got to be similar or very, very close to being the same in each province. I mean, why not open up those borders? I'm sure most business owners would say, yes, let's do this, right? Needing workers and so forth, and now you got to go through more red tape. Parks Canada, let's talk about this a bit. What's this about spending $40 million on new signs? Is there something wrong with our current signs?
Well, I'm going to equate this to something because most of us can't imagine $40 million. But let's say you decide you're going to do a kitchen renovation, right? And you come up with a budget for the kitchen renovation. And then, well, wait a minute, your kitchen flows into your living room. And suddenly the new tiles you have clash with the carpet in the living room. And, well, you had to lift the carpet to do that. One thing leads to another. That's kind of what happened here. Parks Canada decided that their brand was not being maximized properly. They operate, I believe it's 47 national parks across the country. They operate almost 150 national historic sites, and they're a little bothered that when most people hear about Parks Canada, they think of parks. They think that we should be thinking about more than that. And so they wanted to do something to try and change this. Well, that leads to, okay, if they do the brand refresh, then they have to replace the sign. So right within the request for proposals, where they're going to spend $100,000 to come up with a new brand, and industry insiders say for an organization this big, dealing with the government, dealing in English and French plus indigenous languages, that's not crazy. But when I mentioned 40 million on signs, they went, whoa, that's where clients, that's where the public, that's where taxpayers start to get nervous, and rightfully so. So yeah, we could end up spending 40 million on new signs because Parks Canada wants a new brand.
Yeah, in the current economic times, not sure that's the best choice. Just saying. Now, we've got an election coming up in the fall here. Liberals have picked their new slogan, Choose Forward. Interesting. And the Conservatives have theirs, Get Ahead. But you say the Prime Minister should stop pretending and he should call the election now. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, you remember back to 2015, there were all these complaints that Stephen Harper called the election on August 2nd, and the voting day wasn't until October. And he said, well, everyone's campaigning already, so let's just make it fair for everyone. And we all campaign on our own party dollars and not government money. And that actually put himself at a disadvantage because the prime minister always has greater travel abilities and more of what he needs funded by taxpayers than the opposition leaders do. But he said, let's put everyone on the same footing. So he did that. There was outcry. People said, 79 days. I can't believe we're campaigning that long. Look, they've been campaigning since June already. It's just not, quote unquote, an official election campaign. I'm hearing that the prime minister may not call it until September 15th. I could be wrong. He could call it next week on September 3rd and surprise me, but he's not calling it yet. There is a limit of 50 days, which would put it at September 1st. I think he should have just come back from France and called it right away. We are effectively having people campaign on the taxpayers' dime. I don't think that's forward. By the way, I don't have the NDP slogan yet, but it might just be, hey, remember us.
It's going to be really interesting how this works out, especially with the Greens coming up on the fringes on the outside there as well, so who knows. Social issues also showing up in this election. I don't have a lot of time here, running out of time, but I do want to touch on this here. I mean, of course, with the Liberals releasing that, 15 years old, it's a video of Andrew Scheer talking about same-sex marriage, which is, I just kind of chuckled at it a little bit because, what's good for the goose It's got to be good for the gander. I'm thinking, hold on a second. Don't I remember Ralph Goodale?
He tweeted. He's the one that tweeted out the video originally, and he voted against same-sex marriage back in '99. Back then, so did Paul Martin, so did Jean Chrétien, and in 2005, when Scheer did, so did Lawrence Macaulay, who's now in Trudeau's cabinet. So did John McKay, who's been showing up at all kinds of appearances on behalf of the Liberal Party recently. 32 different Liberals did. So there's a bit of hypocrisy there, but it is an issue that Scheer is going to have to deal with one way or another, or it's going to keep coming back. But the Liberals want to use this. They want to use abortion to try and scare voters. This is about dredging up fears, hidden agenda, all of that. It's worked before. Why not go back to the same playbook and see if it'll work again?
Yeah, it seems voters have short memories, right? So, wow, okay. Yeah, you hate to see that, but I mean, that's just the way it is. It's going to get nasty come election time here in a very, very short period of time. So, wow. Brian, as always, really appreciate your insight into these matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.